and welcome back to Consumer Choice Radio. We're speaking here with Joseph McKinney. He's the CEO of the Catawba Digital Economic Zone. Got a very interesting project on our hands and all the time in the world to ask Joseph all about it. Joseph, how are you today?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to be on.
So let's, we got some Discord notifications coming in. Let's hear a little bit about the project. So this is a fairly interesting and new idea. You've got some connections to what we would call Native American territory. You've got sort of Web3, crypto, Bitcoin stuff going on. Give us the lay of the land, the TLDR on what you're doing day to day.
For sure. So the Catawba Digital Economic Zone is a special jurisdiction enabled by the Catawba Indian Nation. They are a federally recognized tribe located here in the Carolinas. And as a federally recognized tribe, they have at least the same status as U.S. states in regards to commercial law and business regulations, and oftentimes more. In February of last year, they passed a law with their legislature creating its own commercial code based on template laws that are used across U.S. states, sans special interest-laden provisions that they normally have. It also has a regulatory body that's capable of issuing regulations at the same level as a U.S. state, as well as registering companies, like a Secretary of State. And since the law passed last year, we passed numerous regulations concerning digital assets, DAOs, and now we're in the pipeline considering banking and stablecoins.
Okay, that's all very exciting. So the thing that I tried to sign up, I went through the whole process. I have not passed all of KYC just yet, but I have gone through the process and looked at the platform and everything. Who is this tailored to? If I'm someone who's interested in this, who am I as your ideal, let's not say customer, but perhaps resident or e-citizen or whatever you might call it?
So there, like with every good company, you have an initial target market. But our overall goal is to, as we say, disrupt Delaware. So basically any company that can be registered and domiciled remotely, that is our target market. But Facebook didn't become Facebook by going out to the general market. It went to elite universities, then it went to public universities, then to the general public. Likewise, we're going to stick with a certain set of industries that have the most advantage that we can provide initially, that we can have a 10x versus simply just a slight advantage. And the first industry that we looked at is Web3. And the reason for that is that there's a significant lack of regulatory clarity or even commercial law clarity in regards to digital assets. It's also very low-hanging fruit for a lot of state-level jurisdictions. So that's why we're focusing initially on them and why our initial set of regulations focus on Web3.
And so just so you can walk listeners through, what is the incentive or the benefits for this tribe in regards to creating these legal structures and hosting maybe some of these remote businesses?
Yes. So like most successful special economic zone projects around the world, it is a for-profit public-private partnership, with the tribe being the 51% partners, as well as having majority board control, 100% of the regulatory body control, accountable to the elected leadership as well as their legislature. So they have incentives in forms of revenue, as well as economic development and sovereignty. Because like a lot of tribes in the United States, they didn't have commercial codes prior to this project. And the reason for that is not because the tribes don't have the ability to be sovereign and to regulate companies that are within their jurisdiction, but simply because a lot of tribes, for historical reasons that we're all very familiar with, haven't had the financial resources in order to invest in full-scale governance. So they've done these one-off versions of jurisdictional arbitrage where they themselves are the company and focusing on industries that we're all very familiar with, such as gaming or payday lending, cannabis, and what have you. But they are serving as a government to other businesses to conduct business and then to generate fees from that economic activity.
So there's probably a couple of other federal tribes who could have partnered with you. What made my brethren in the Catawba Valley, and I guess the Catawba area? I grew up around the Carolinas. So why did they become an ideal partner for this project and everything related to sort of this technological vision that you're putting together?
Well, like everything in this project, this initiative was Catawba-led since the beginning. And one of the provisions in the Catawba, what they call it a settlement act, but it's basically a modern-day treaty with the federal government when they restored their sovereignty after fighting for it since the 40s in 1993. One of the provisions was to have an enterprise zone and foreign trade zone. So the idea of zones was already acutely on their mind for quite some time. And also based on the treaty that they have with South Carolina, they were restricted from having a casino in the South Carolina. So they had to be, pretty scrappy in terms of how they generate economic development. So they started looking at different avenues, and special economic zone was one of them.
Okay, that's interesting. And I guess with, I guess as a practical question, let's say I am to sign up through the portal, I'm to go to the website, and I would recommend that a lot of our listeners go to it, Catawba Digital Zone. You guys can find that there. You have a sort of button here, create a company. What's my kind of step-by-step process, and what can I do with that company?
Yeah, absolutely. So you go through that, you first create a username, login, what have you. Then you put your address, and then you're going to be asked to do a KYC check using your phone through the platform. After that, you'll be approved for KYC, and then you'll be able to create a company, put in the address, mailing address, as well as the name of the company. And after that, you have a company with its own certificate of organization and certificate of good standing, et cetera, that you can use to, conduct any form of business that you would be able to with a Delaware company, except for you have the legal certainty about how your digital assets and digital industries will be treated under existing law. Also, you have the ability to set up a DAO LLC at this point that allows you to conduct a DAO while having limited liability protections and the ability to access, regulate financial services such as banking and what have you, versus like a lot of DAOs right now are sort of operating as general partners.
Okay, interesting. And if you could explain for the audience, because they're not everybody's up on the DAOs, as it were, but there's I believe a similar provision in Wyoming. What is a kind of DAO, and what advantage does that have over a traditional LLC?
Well, so the definition of DAO has fluctuated over time, but it stands for decentralized autonomous organization. And generally speaking, it's a form of entity that leverages distributed ledger technology like the blockchain in order to do certain public utility goods, or to do nonprofit goals or investing. And it has a more flexible governance model than standard corporations. And the goal is to decentralize or disintermediate, or even to have more horizontal forms of organization in some cases. But the point being, the thing that holds them all together is that they have alternative governance structures besides standard corporations, and they operate online using distributed ledger technology. And that can be helpful for a lot of purposes. Sometimes it can be for not so helpful purposes. Some interesting forms of a DAO are you can form an investment DAO where you have people within your network that are invested in certain sectors. You can have them do public services, what have you. Like, for instance, there are DAOs that do fact checking for certain things. There's also just kind of wacky DAOs that are like essentially nonprofits that do like public goods things, such as purchasing land for environmental conservation. And there was even a case where they tried to buy a copy of the Declaration of Independence.
Wasn't it the Constitution? Constitution is?
Oh, it was Constitution DAO. Okay,
it's
exactly.
one of those founding documents, eh?
To be honest, I was thinking that Nicolas Cage meme, like, we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence, and we're going to buy the Declaration of Independence,
basically,
as DAO.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so, just so you can walk listeners through, what is the incentive or the benefits for this tribe in regards to creating these legal structures and hosting maybe some of these remote businesses?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go back to our not our mission statement, but sort of our tagline, Disrupt Delaware. We want to be the location for company incorporation in the United States. And we see that we have advantages there because we have all the advantages normally associated with a state level jurisdiction, often higher, but also just on a structural level, the way that it's a for-profit special economic zone, as well as governed by a nimble 5-person commission that meets on a regular basis. Unlike Wyoming, which meets literally every 2 years to pass new laws, we can always be ahead of the game, and we can always provide a better service and grow over time.
Interesting. Okay, and what has been the interaction from any of the, forgive the term, but fiat institutions? Let's say you've had interactions with, perhaps you've had interaction with banks or authorities in South Carolina or North Carolina. What has been the acceptance of this project? How has that been so far?
It's actually been very positive. You even met with some three-letter agencies, and initially we thought that we were going to get some pushback, but it just keeps going back to our thesis. The most bipartisanly supported issue is tribes, and we all know, and they know, what the legal authority of tribes are, which is, as I'll say again and again, same level as U.S. states and oftentimes more. And also, there's a lot of policy objectives to ensure that tribal governments have economic development and that they have their own sovereign systems for economic empowerment. And we've seen that as well on the state level from the brief interactions that we've had. And we do have, banking partners that are willing to service CDES companies. So, it's always an education process, but we haven't had conflict.
Okay. That's actually great to know, because I know, there have been other examples of other sort of startup societies or economic zones in other areas, and there's always been conflict. But as I mentioned to David before our interview, it's sort of it's a kind of a backdoor loophole in that you have these sovereign territories that are recognized in the Constitution and many other documents and do have sovereignty over these issues, and it's kind of up to them what they would like to do and what they would like to host. And it seems in hosting you, or I don't know the exact terminology, they're proving themselves much more open than many other states, especially the blue states, California, New York. I think that's all the more reason to be optimistic.
Absolutely. And I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't call it a loophole. It's baked into the very core of the American experiment. Tribes are a pre-constitutional sovereign that's baked right into the Interstate Commerce Clause. That's baked right into the Constitution. So it's always been the case. The problem is they just haven't had the resources to actually fully expand into that sovereign role. And I think one of the key differentiating factors between other startup society projects and, let's say, this project is that many startup society projects are outsider groups that are coming in to take a piece of sovereignty and try to use it to their objectives. This is a Catawba project. They have absolute control, financial interest. This is theirs. They voted it directly, not some weird presidential decree or what have you. This is their project, and as a consequence of that, it's definitely shown in what they've been able to accomplish.
All right. I am totally corrected on that, and I stand corrected. I didn't know the exact terminology for this, but I think it's absolutely true. One thing for Canadian listeners to know is, that we've always had these sort of, in Canada, you have the Indian Act, or you got all these other different governmental decrees, legislation that does grant a lot of these powers, but it is true, you have not seen this kind of economic opportunity that's presented itself, and it's as if the sort of crypto Web3 world is kind of opening up to that. What are some of the other connections to, David, I'll let you go.
I was just going to say, the opportunities here, obviously, the historical conversation of how Indigenous people have been treated or struggled, and this being kind of an empowerment moment there where they really get to flex their rights or flex their sovereignty. There's an example in Canada where an Indigenous group decided they wanted to build a 400-unit apartment building, and all of the NIMBYs said no, and the Indigenous group was like, well, we get to make this call. Because that is our right. So it feels like there could be a lot of opportunity in this space, obviously not necessarily building homes, but using it as a real opportunity to disrupt, to foster innovation, to foster economic growth, to kind of put people back in charge. Is that an accurate assessment, or am I maybe looking at this through rose-colored glasses?
No, I mean, I have the same assessment as you, and maybe that means I have rose-colored glasses. But I think it actually it's actually the facts. The goal is to foster responsible innovation while tying it to existing law and standard practices and consumer protection, what have you, while at the same time not adding additional barriers that are unnecessary to limit innovation. And you know, I kind of see this, and I don't know another word to describe this, but a form of justice or karma, of having Native American tribes reasserting their sovereignty after hundreds of years, and beautifully enough to do so through the governance of technology and allowing the fostering of markets. I think that's beautiful, and it's a way of tribes to reassert themselves in their
And
rightful
how many
place.
people have sort of signed up or already started companies? I don't know if that's public information, but have you seen a growing number of interest from people? And I noticed on the website, it's not just Americans. There are many other people who can sign up for this.
Yeah. So we have about 90 different countries worldwide that you can register from, and we have dozens of people register from the companies just the United States. But if you are from outside the United States, we're now opening our doors to all y'all as well.
Look at that. Well, it looks like plenty of the audience here of Consumer Choice Radio, also in the Sauga 960 Toronto area, will be open to that. Well, Joseph, this has been great, very informative. Definitely learned a lot. We're going to point a lot of our listeners to that, and podcast version and stuff will also link to the website. But yeah, tell us how people can reach out to you if they are interested in learning more, and what else?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, go to catawbadigital.zone. If you want to check out our regulatory and legal framework, check out zoneauthority.io. And feel free to reach out to any of us on the contact page, as well as see our social medias on that as well.